So I was raised in a Christian home. That means I was in church 9 months before I was born. And my dad was a deacon, served on a bunch of positions. My mom played the organ for, I think, 60 years. So yeah, a long time. And when you're raised in church, as a kid, you learn a lot of these accounts in the Bible. Joseph, the coat of many colors, Noah and the ark, Joshua, and you're going around the walls of Jericho, Ruth, Esther, and of course, some of these you learn by song. Zacchaeus was a wee little man. A wee little man was he. He climbed up in the sycamore tree for the Lord he wanted to see. I mean, that's how you teach kids these kind of things. By the way, I've learned that adults pick up on that pretty well too. So there, but one of the stories that, of course, you learn when you're a kid is it's about the three asbestos Jews. And so we're going to read about those guys today in Daniel chapter 3. So we turn to Daniel 3. Now, I'm not a big fan of catchy outlines and stuff because people remember them maybe to the end of lunch, but probably not. And I just think they're kind of silly and not necessary. However, you just can't help it with a passage like this. We'll get these three dudes. They don't bow, they don't bend, they don't burn. So this is my goofy outline for the year. We'll get it out of the way early in 26. So we're all thankful for that, I'm sure. So let's just look at how they didn't bow. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold whose height was 60 cubits and its breadth 6 cubits. And he set up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Then King Nebuchadnezzar sent to gather the satraps, prefects, the governors, counselors, treasurers, justices, and magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then the satraps, prefects, governors, counselors, treasurers, and justices, magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces gathered for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. The herald proclaimed aloud, "You're commanded, O people, nations, and languages, that when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, you are to fall down and worship the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace. Therefore, as soon as all the peoples heard the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, all the people, nations, languages fell down and worshiped the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Therefore, at that time, certain Chaldeans came forward and maliciously accused the Jews. They declared to King Nebuchadnezzar, 'O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that every man who hears the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into a burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom you have appointed over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, pay no attention to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up.'" So there's a lot that kind of happens in here, and a lot that we just don't talk this way. On occasion, if I don't have a measuring tape nearby, I will measure in cubits. A cubit is your elbow to the end of your middle finger, so roughly 18 inches. Then there's a royal cubit, Egyptian cubit, and that creates a lot of questions. How big was Noah's Ark? How tall was actually Goliath? Because they're all different lengths. But we'll just go with the standard, 18 inches. That means that we have a 90-foot tall statue, including the base that would have sat on. And it's about 9 feet wide. Now, we're not exactly sure. It doesn't tell us what the image is. I mean, I guess the obvious option would be Nebuchadnezzar himself. But it is possible that this is a result of the dream that he had in chapter 2, where he saw this big image, had a golden head and bronze body, and then he had the legs and clay of iron, all that kind of stuff. And so that's what motivated this. Now, but regardless, he has this image, and he wants everybody to come and gather. So he brings all these people. Now, here we have a challenge. The people in Old Testament times spoke Hebrew. Most Old Testament Hebrew, except for a little bit in Ezra and Nehemiah, and right here in Daniel. There's a section beginning in chapter 2, verse 4, where it's in Aramaic. So if that's not complicated enough, all the positions that are mentioned here are Babylonian. So we have Babylonian terms that are brought into Hebrew, into Aramaic, and now they try to bring them into English. So here's what happens. Sometimes translators are like, we don't know. We don't know what this is. So we have a Babylonian word, satrap, that's brought into Hebrew, brought into Aramaic, and brought into English as, well, satrap. All we know is they're officials. They would have been political leaders and religious leaders, because in the ancient world, the nations and the gods were all kind of seen as sort of intertwined, and that'll kind of play a key part here in a minute. So now, he Daniel tells everybody, here we got another problem. And this, I just even reading in English. I'm gonna be honest with you. When I hear the word bagpipe, I don't think the ancient Near East. Where did bagpipes come from? Oh, Babylon. Everybody knows that. I'm like, what? This is what it tells you. No matter what translation you're using, we don't know. Because these are instruments that they rarely occur, and so we got to call them something. And so they got these, and I don't know what a trigon is either, and I'm a musician. But I do know this: a harp and a lyre were guitars. Okay. Have you ever seen a harp? They're taller than you, and they roll them around on a wheel. You really see David dragging something like that on a hillside while he's watching the sheep? He got a guitar on his back, and he pulls it off. And because the King James, written 500 years ago, used the word harp because there weren't guitars, we just kind of are afraid to change that. But look, it's just a guitar. So David just pulls it off and starts strumming in G and writes, the Lord is my shepherd. And there we go. Like that's the way that it works. And so, but anyway, when the band plays, then everybody's supposed to fall down and worship. And sure enough, this is what happens. Now, here's the reason that happened. Because throughout the ancient world, everybody believed that the gods were territorial. Each nation had its god, and that God operated in their turf. And so if you're on another god's turf, you would worship that god. It's no big deal. Now, I don't really have a way modern to try to illustrate this except for this ridiculous one, but hopefully help you understand. If you're in Safeway, you pay Safeway prices. If you're in Fry's, you pay Fry's prices. If you're in Walmart, you pay Walmart. You don't go in to Fry's and go, no. I want the Safeway price because I have a frequent flyer card with Safeway. I want my points and I want the Safeway price. No, you pay what's in the store. So whatever nation you're in, you worship their God. That's just the way everybody did it. And so these people have no problem because they're in Babylon worshiping this Babylonian deity. Except for one group of people. These are the people that God has called to himself and has made them very aware there aren't multiple gods who inhabit multiple lands. There's one God who's over everything. And you don't worship any others, you don't follow any others, you don't serve any others. There's only one. So that's why in verse 8, it says that they make an accusation against the Jews. Because the Jews said, we're not going to bow down because we don't recognize any of these deities. We have a commitment to the one true God. So they go and butter up the king. Hey, remember you made this promise you're going to burn him in the fiery furnace and all that? Because, well, there's certain Jews, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Calls them out in verse 12. Now, this is not their name. Their names are Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. But when they arrived in Babylon, they were renamed. And here's the reason. Naming someone shows authority. You're the parent. You're the authority in the house. You pick the names of your children. That shows your authority over them. You don't wait till they're old enough to decide their own name or gender. It's a sign of authority. That's what happens. We rescued a greyhound when our kids were young. And we didn't like the name they had, so we named him Bullet. Makes perfect sense. It's the second fastest land animal. Why wouldn't you name him Bullet? We talked about adopting another one. If we had, we'd have named him Missile. Like, it just makes sense for this fast an animal. Now, we had the right to name that dog because we now had authority over him. So when they brought him to Babylon, they said, we're going to show our authority over you. We're going to give you Babylonian names. We're going to rename you. And so that's where it comes from. Now, there's a great danger in trying to make a case over something that's not in the Bible. Don't argue from silence. But there's something drastically missing here. That's Daniel. And we have the record in Daniel of 4 guys, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, that these are the 4 boys that are brought together. Now, at some point, it appears they've been spread out around the kingdom and given positions of responsibility, but Daniel's not mentioned here. And I can guarantee you, if Daniel was there, he would not have bowed either. Okay, so the fact that Daniel's not mentioned indicates that probably he's away on some kind of royal business or something, maybe even out of the country, and he's nowhere around for this. It's probably the reason why he's not there, but he's not one of the ones that's mentioned. And so they're accused and for the king to be burned. Now, this is not unusual at all. In the 120s AD, Eustachius was one of the top Roman generals. After a series of victorious battles, King Adrian wanted to have a celebration, and part of that celebration involved an idolatrous festival giving credit to a pagan deity for the victory in battle, and Eustachius, as a follower of Jesus, refused to do so. In his anger, Adrian had not only him executed, but every single family member of his that they could track down and find were killed. And it wasn't just in Bible times or shortly thereafter in somehow what we call ancient history. It's still going on today. There are tens of thousands of people in Nigeria being executed for being Christians. Now, you don't hear it in the news because the news wants to make us look bad. You know, we're mean, vicious, underhanded. No, we're not. Okay, apparently you are. We're not mean, vicious, underhanded, hypocritical. That's not us. That's not us. That's the way we get portrayed in the media. Like they don't want to say, and if you portray Christians as being executed by Muslim extremists, that doesn't make us look bad. So that's why you don't hear about it in the media. But I mean, it's just a wholesale slaughter because they're followers of Jesus. This has been going on throughout all of history. Followers of the one true God are often persecuted and sometimes killed. So these three guys are not the only three in history who have refused to bow. There are many, and there are many today, who in the face of the same kind of threats as these guys face, refused to bow. Not only did they not bow, they didn't bend. Nebuchadnezzar's, he's wicked, but not that wicked. He get a little nice streak running through here. Look at verse 13. Nebuchadnezzar, in furious rage, commanded Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to be brought. So they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I've set up? Now, if you are ready, when you hear the sound of the hornpipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, to fall down and worship the image that I have made, well and good. But if you do not worship, you shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace, and who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands?" Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we don't have to answer you in this matter. If this be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up." So Nebuchadnezzar says, okay, look, guys, I know I said if you don't bow, I'm going to throw you in the furnace, but I'm going to give you a second chance. I'm going to give you another opportunity here. So we're going to play the music again, and we'll give you an opportunity this time to bow. So DJ? And they go, no, it doesn't matter. This is already settled business. We don't even, when they say we don't need to answer you, what they mean is we don't need to talk about it. We don't need to discuss, hey, you know what? We could maybe sort of bow, but in our minds we're really bowing to the Lord and not to the idol. And so, or do we, hey, how do we, no. It's settled. It's done. God is first. That's it. And when that's the case, then there are just some things that come from that. And one of the things that comes from that is we're not going to worship your idols. It's just, there's no discussion. Now, I told you I was raised in a Christian home. Now, my parents, they made plenty of mistakes. And I know, yeah, we're looking at one. My parents made plenty of mistakes because nobody's perfect. I mean, my parents made mistakes, plenty of them. My wife made a lot of mistakes. But not as many as my kid's dad made, I can assure you. But my parents, one of the things that was really interesting growing up, there was never, ever, ever, ever a single discussion about whether or not we were going to go to church. We just did. Like on Sunday morning. Now, we had plenty of discussion. As a kid, in those days, I had to wear a tie to church. There were plenty of discussions about, man, I'm so glad the world's better now. But that was like, but I mean, there was no discussion because that's how it was. Now, it was a little bit different for my kids. For my family, every Sunday was basically bring your kids to work with you day. But it was like being at church was never discussed as though somehow it was optional. Because here's the thing. For kids, going to church shows that God's important. And if you have to discuss, well, are we going to go to church today? What you're really discussing is God important? Like if God's important, then there doesn't need to be a discussion. Now I'm not one of these legalists that, we take roll, check Sue's here. Now we are today, just a couple guys in the balcony are taking roll of all the men who missed because their wife is away at the women's retreat. And we'll read the list next week. But I realize that sometimes, and I'm not like look, if you're sick, we prefer you not to be here. I mean, I understand someone's away for work or whatever. I mean, it's last Sunday. He was on vacation with the pastor's wife. But the reality is, if God is number one, therefore church is not. It's like it doesn't have to be discussed. It just is. It just is. So I encourage you as parents to implement this in your home. Like we don't discuss, well, do we want to go to church today? Man, if Jesus is number one, we go. That's what we do. So I think we are going to start taking attendance next week. If you miss, you'll get a call. Brother Kevin's got 2 more weeks. We're going to work him like a dog. No, but the point is, because he's number one in this house. So for them, there's no discussion about bowing down. Because God is number one, this is already settled issue. We're not going to do it. We're not going to bend. We're not going to try to come up with something. We're not going to happen. So, because of that, they're going to be tossed into the fire. But the good news is they're not going to burn. Look at verse 19. Nebuchadnezzar was filled with fury. Man, this guy gets filled with anger a lot. And the expression of his face was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And he ordered the furnace heated 7 times more than it was usually heated. And he ordered some of the mighty men of his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their cloaks, their tunics, their hats, their outer garments, and they were thrown into the burning fiery furnace. Because the king's orders were urgent and the furnace was overheated, the flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these men, 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell bound into the burning fiery furnace. Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished and rose up in haste. He declared to his counselors, did we not throw 3 men bound in the fire? And the answer said the king, true, O king. He answered and said, I see 4 unbound, walking in the midst of the fire. They are not hurt, and the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the door of the burning fire furnace. He declared, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out from the fire. And the satraps, prefects, the governors, the king's counselors gathered together and saw that the fire had not any power over the bodies of those men. The hair of their heads was not singed. It means more for some of you than some of us. Their cloaks were not harmed, and no smell of fire had come upon them. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said, blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants, who trusted in him and set aside the king's command, and yielded up their bodies rather than serve and worship any god except their own God. Therefore I make a decree, any people, nation, or language that speaks anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego will be torn limb from limb, their houses laid in ruins, for there is no other God who is able to rescue in this way. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. Make sure my shoe's tied before I trip. That'd be a memorable Sunday. Now, there's a lot that happens here. So let's just deal with a couple of things that scholars crack me up. And because when they write commentaries, they just go on and on and on about what kind of furnace this was and what it looked like and all this kind of stuff. And let's make a couple of things that are obvious. This is not a pottery furnace. Unless you're making some awfully gigantic pottery. A little kiln for pottery ain't going to be big enough for people to walk around in. This is a giant furnace. So it may have been used to heat the palace. probably in all likelihood, it was some kind of perhaps smelting furnace where they would, put in the ore, and then you get hot enough that, it would separate out the metal, whatever it was, copper or iron or whatever it is. And then they would have, the dross, you pull it off, all that kind of stuff. And so it'd been, like a large opening for them to work the ore in and pull out the metal, all that kind of stuff. And so that probably all likelihood, that's why they have this giant kind of smelting furnace. So when it says they heated it 7 times, y'all do know that's not literal, right? It just means getting really, really hot. Then like somebody sitting there with a thermometer going, sorry guys, we're only at 6 times, let's keep it going. Like it's not that, it's just the way of saying, man, get as hot as you possibly can. So there are probably several openings around the furnace, and so they pull up extra bellows, and you've got the guys that are, working the bellows to get the air in there. And because it says they fell into the furnace, or they were lifted up and fell in the furnace, and translations are different. People think it must have been an opening at the top, and that's probably not what happened. They didn't come with some ladder and throw them in. Let's face it, they're bound. And so they're bound. So how do you get bound, guys? They're wrapped up in rope into the furnace. Well, here's how. You lay them down, Billy Bob gets on one end, I get on the other. And we pick them up. And he's got them by the shoulders. I got them by the ankles. He said, 1, 2, 3, and in they go. And if you're bound, you're not going to land on your feet. I know you think you're athletic. You're not landing on your feet. You're going to fall into the furnace on the ground. I mean, that's what happens. And so they're tossing them in. Well, so you got these guys who are up close enough to throw them into the furnace. At the same time, you got men around there working the bellows. So somewhere in the process of throwing them in the furnace, then this flame shoots out and kills them. Now, I am a visual learner. So when I read things in the Bible, I picture it in my head. So here's what I picture. Cartoons. You see the cartoon where the guy gets like poof, and he's just like just a stick, and then it all falls down into a little, that's what I picture. Wile E. Coyote. Literally, that's what I see, these flames come. I know that my brain's not normal, but that's the way up there. So even these guys all get burnt in the process of tossing them all into the furnace. And then verse 24, Nebuchadnezzar is astonished and rose up, says, did we throw 3? Which isn't like, I'm not sure, was it 27 or 28? Like this 3 is not hard. 3 dudes, and they'll go, yeah, there are 3. He goes, why do I see 4? Now, nowhere in the text does indicate that anybody else saw them. So I don't know if only Nebuchadnezzar saw the 4th guy or if everybody did. It doesn't say, but anyway, he says, I'd see them, and we know that the fire worked because it burned the ropes. So how did it not burn the ropes? Because it says they're walking about. If they're still bound, they'll be hopping about. You'll figure it out in a minute. Like so, they burn the ropes off. So these guys are, going for a stroll in the fire. But then he makes this statement: the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods. Now here we have a difficulty. And again, commentators just love to spill a ton of ink on this stuff. So the person speaking is Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar is a pagan. He believes in multiple gods, lots of them, called polytheism. He just added one more to the list with his golden statue thing out there. So Nebuchadnezzar doesn't believe that this is the Son of God like we think of from the New Testament. As a matter of fact, the challenge we have here is a language challenge. Now, I know y'all showed up today because you want the pastor, to give you a Hebrew lecture. So I will. This isn't Aramaic, but functions similar to Hebrew, at least syntactically. And so what we have here is a construct relationship. This is where it gets difficult. Because the word for God in the Old Testament is also the word for gods, plural, with a little g, or God, singular, with a little g. So a false god is the same word God as we use the same word. False god, still G-O-D, it's just we use a little g or a big G. Well, in Hebrew, there is no big or little. In Aramaic, there's no uppercase or lowercase. So this can be translated a son of God, a son of gods, a son of the gods, the son of God, the son of gods. We don't know. Like it's a lot of challenges to it. Probably what we have here is an angelic figure. And so because this angelic person is in the human form, that would make him probably more likely a cherubim. The seraphim were serpentine, and they were fiery. That's what you expect was a seraphim. They're in the fire. You'd think you would have matter of fact, the word for fire is the word, well, seraphim. And so we have, flaming angels would be in the fire, right? That's what we expect, but the human forms are probably cherubim. Because look, I see a fourth one walking around, and he looks angelic. Because that's the way the Babylonians would use the phrase, a son of the gods, like it's some kind of angelic figure that's in there. Now, what angel is this? I don't know. Gabriel? Maybe. Michael? Maybe. Maybe, I don't know, I kind of partial the idea that the angel's name was Paul. I do know that his name is not Lucifer. Now, he will someday be in the fire. And he will not be consumed, but will suffer eternally. Yeah, so he's in there with them. So Nebuchadnezzar gets close, but not close enough to get burned. He gets close and calls them, and so they come out, and everybody wants to see him. So they all gather up to them, and they're like, I find this thing, they don't even smell like smoke. That doesn't make sense. I have a custom-made fire pit, big thing I ordered from out of state a few years ago. It's a coyote and all this stuff carved into it. It's pretty cool. And I like to just sit out by the fire pit. But I don't know if you ever noticed it, but when you're around a fire, the smoke moves in your direction. Now, there's some reasons in physics why that is, but I found even if there's like two people, it still seems to always move in my direction. And I smell like smoke. Like, these guys don't even need a bath. I mean, they don't smell at all. Now, again, because I'm a visual learner, I've got all these cartoons that people have done over the years of these three guys and all. If I could, and I can't draw at all, but if I could draw, my cartoon would be, smells like a bakery. And so he's like, man, they smell good. So they're all shocked. Now, here's what's interesting. Nebuchadnezzar has seen this, but he is not converted. He doesn't make a proclamation that everybody's now to worship the only true God. He says, hey, look, I tell you what, we're going to keep worshiping our gods, but you can worship your God because of what we just saw him do. None of the satraps or governors, none of them become believers. They're all the same as well. Because remember, they believe in multiple gods. So now they're like, oh, cool. Well, there's another God we can add to the group that we'll worship. And so the king just basically says, look, you three guys can keep worshiping your God. And so we'll make an exception for you that you can do this. But there's no kind of conversion here. So what's it like, being Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the middle of all of this? Well, maybe it's kind of like David Livingstone. I assume you're familiar with David Livingstone, a great pioneer that basically mapped the continent of Africa, took the gospel of Jesus Christ with him everywhere he went. He was invited to the University of Glasgow to receive an honorary doctorate. And when he walked out, there was just a hushed silence. He was thin, pale, looked unhealthy because of almost 20 years of deprivation, rarely sleeping indoors, usually sleeping out on the ground. He had one arm that hung useless because he'd been attacked by a lion, and it torn all the tendons and muscles, so it was one arm that was completely useless. And as he stepped up to address that crowd of students and professors and dignitaries, this is what he said. Shall I tell you what supported me through all those years of exile among a people whose language I could not understand, and whose attitude toward me was always uncertain and often hostile? It was this: lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the world. I'm with you. What sustains these three guys? Lo, I am with you. But here's the key to chapter 3. It's not about being delivered from the fiery furnace, even though that's pretty cool. Actually, it's really cool. I don't know if there'll be video recordings in heaven, but it'd be really cool if God said, look, I know it wasn't invented yet, but I can record stuff. And so hit play and just watch this. Like, that'd be cool. It'd be really, really awesome. Especially if you're sitting there next to all three of them. And me being me, you know what I do? But that's not really what this chapter's bound by. This whole thing starts, exists, ends with the same thing. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego all believe that God is worthy of being faithful. Yes. God is worthy of serving. Our God can deliver us, but if he does not, we will still serve him. Yes. God is worthy, therefore we will not bow before your idols. God, what motivates you and me is not that God might snatch you out of the burning fiery furnace. It's that God is worthy of you being faithful. God is worthy of our consistency. He's worthy of our worship. He's worthy of our faithfulness. He's worthy of our commitment. He's worthy of us saying, I'm willing to suffer. He's worthy of us saying, I will not bow to your idols. He is worthy of us saying, I will not bend to your idols. He is worthy of us saying, we won't even discuss it because God alone deserves our worship and our life. Our God is worthy. And that's why these guys do this, because of the worthiness of our God. Well, why is God so worthy? Well, because I'm a filthy sinner. The Bible says that, man, all of us are guilty of breaking His law. And if you've broken one, you're guilty of breaking them all. And that we just stand, just buried with our own guilt and our own brokenness because of our own disobedience to God and His word and His truth and His law. And because He is a righteous and a just God, I deserve the full wrath and fury of His anger against my sin. But by His grace that goes beyond anything I could comprehend, understand, I can't even begin to describe it. By His grace, God sent His Son Jesus, not just to die on a cross, but die in my place, so that all of my sin, all of my guilt, all of it, not most of it, some of it, a good part, all of my sin, all of my guilt, 100% was crucified to the cross in Jesus Christ so that all of my sin is paid for and I bear no guilt anymore because of what Jesus Christ has done for me. And then 3 days later, on a Sunday morning, Jesus walked out of a tomb alive to seal and guarantee that I will be with my God forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. My God is worthy of my worship and my life because of what He has done for me in Jesus Christ. And here's the deal. If I can get you to grasp a vision of the worthiness of God, you will never need me to motivate you to serve Him. You will never need me to motivate you to be faithful. You won't have to get somebody else to get you, geared up and ready. Like, you will want to serve Him because you believe that He is worthy. And if you don't believe He is worthy, no matter what I may preach, I'm never going to motivate you to serve Him. Man, just get a vision that these guys did of the worthiness of our God. And when you do, you'll discover, I want to serve Him. I want to be faithful to Him. That's what motivates these three guys, the worthiness of our God. And I believe that's what will motivate us when we realize how great our God is, how awesome our God is, and how worthy our God is. Our Heavenly Father, it is really cool that You delivered them from the fiery furnace. It's really awesome that they would look in the face of the king of the Babylonian Empire and say, we don't care what you say, we will not bow before your idol. That they were ready to die for their faith because they believe that You are worthy. God, I pray that You would help us to see Your glory and Your worthiness and Your honor. That would motivate and drive us to be just as faithful as these three guys. Father, we thank You for what Jesus has done for us, showing us Your glory and Your worthiness. And it is in His name that we pray. Amen.